What's up, humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Okay, so it's been a really busy week. I've already done 3 videos for this week, and it's only Tuesday, so there's a lot of information coming out. We are expecting the October 18 release of UFO documents that were ordered by the legislation. These companies from aerospace and other places who have any information about UFOs and evidence and video and everything needs to be released to the government. And the government will make a decision whether it affects national security. If it doesn't, they're going to release as much as they can to the public. That is the October surprise that people are expecting in the UFO community. There's also, in the meantime, when UFO Twitter week was going on, my friend Ida Cuellar decided to drop a bombshell of a video. It's more never before seen material of his documentary, The Secret of Dr. Grinberg, which I've been covering ever since I started the channel. My second ever video was about that documentary. It was all in Spanish. But I've been doing a lot of research over the last 3 years. And I've been trying to find out what happened to Grinberg. Over the course of these 3 years, I've found some photographic evidence that he was in conferences and summits in different parts of the world, Madrid, Costa Rica, Brazil, different parts, with the likes of Dr. Jacques Vallée, John Keel, Andrija Puharich, and other researchers from either Latin America or Europe. I found out too that these conferences had been happening since the late 1800s. It's major summits and conferences about phenomenology that I now think are organized by the quote unquote Invisible College, because the Invisible College is not an institution per se. If you are part of a group of scientists who are dabbling in phenomenology, you can consider yourself part of this Invisible College. And Grinberg was part of this college because he attended multiple of these conferences. But one of the biggest storylines of his documentary was his relationship with author Carlos Castaneda, who, if you guys don't know who he is, he's a Peruvian bloodline American author who studied in a university in California. He studied anthropology, and he had a PhD in anthropology, and his dissertation was what eventually became the teachings of Don Juan. This is still to this day one of the most important books of alternative literature that became like a bastion of the counterculture during the 60s. The book tells the tale of Carlos Castaneda's trip to the north of Mexico with the Yaquis and his learning process with a famous shaman named Don Juan MAtus. It was eventually discovered that Don Juan actually didn't really exist, but there is a lot of debate over this topic because there's people who claim that he did exist and they met him, and then there's like professional documentarians that talk about Don Juan being like an amalgamation of different shamans that wanted to keep their identities protected. But Carlos Castaneda invented Don Juan out of all of these shamans that he did meet in person. And from whom he learned a lot. Because when he returned from that trip, Castaneda became a cult leader who actually his school of shamanism is still going on to this day, even though he died in the 90s. And this is like one of the biggest cautionary tales of people who dabble in this type of information, specifically human potential, where the light is so bright that it blinds them, and they succumb to power and to ego. That is exactly what happened with Castaneda, and the reason he became a cult leader. He had like 4 disciples who were all women, and he had a sentimental relationship with all of them, and eventually he had major issues with them, and there were murders. It was packed with everything. I'm gonna leave a link to one of the most famous documentaries about Castaneda in the description. It's from the BBC. But the reason I am covering this today is because Ida Cuellar captured the interactions that existed between Grinberg and Castaneda. Initially, they became fast friends because a lot of what Grinberg was studying, Castaneda already knew about, but he came to it from a different angle, from the shamanism angle. But he sought out power. He sought out to become a man of power. In the book of Don Juan talks about these magical plants, datura, and the little humito, little smoke. Little smoke granted him wisdom, and the datura plant, which is the plant of power, granted him power. And that plant had the capacity to kill a man if he didn't use the plant accordingly. Castaneda was known for using these plants amongst his disciples. When Grinberg met him, he had a first impression that he was an interesting character and he was someone with a high level of influence. So he decided, out of respect and care for Castaneda, to go to California, meet with him, and see if he could help in any way to prevent for this power to get a hold of Castaneda. But when they met, Grinberg realized that it was too late. And over the course of a weekend, I think it was, when they spent time together for days, Grinberg decided to cut ties with Carlos. And because Carlos asked him that if he wanted to go down the path that he was on, he had to renounce his family, renounce life, renounce everything in order to get on the path of power, which is something that Grinberg never sought after. He wanted the wisdom to help people because his synergic theory was essentially a way for him to tell the world about the capabilities we have and that we all were able to display these capabilities. Castaneda, a man of power by definition, always sought out power for themselves and they never wanted to share it completely. It is very much like the path of the Sith Master in Star Wars lore, where there's only 2 always, One of them is the one who holds all the power, and the other one is the one who craves it. This is the way Castaneda operated all the time. Even though he had multiple disciples, he was the one who allegedly had this power. So, in my search for answers of what happened to Grinberg when he disappeared, there's this clip that I found of one of Grinberg's collaborators that I didn't know about. I asked Ida about this clip that I'm about to show you to ask him if maybe Carlos has had something to do with Grinberg's disappearance. Ida said that he did his own research and he came out with the conclusion that he didn't. But it is still a very interesting document that before he disappeared, Grinberg had a major disagreement with Carlos of a revelation that Grinberg did in one of his books. So I'm going to play the video for you right here.
Jacobo has an editor in Spain, I don't know who, and he receives a phone call one day. He was very upset. To have upset Jacobo was something, in my experience, it was very difficult, and he did get angry with the heavy traffic and paperwork, but it was like grumbling. He would arrive and calm down, get into what he was doing and so on, but really angry, really out of himself. I only saw him like that once, and it was precisely during that conversation. They call him from Spain. He starts shouting. We were sitting there, and an absolute silence fell. We didn't know exactly what was happening, and he was really very upset. And what he was saying is I don't have to respect the confidentiality of this information, because he didn't respect the agreement we had regarding keeping this information confidential. So publish it, I said it, I stand by it. Publish it just as I sent it to you. He was saying this to the person from Spain and something else. I don't know what the person from Spain was saying to him. And Jacobo was shouting, no, it's not possible. He's a very terrible person. And adjectives like disqualifying this person or the phone, and he was going around, and I remember snorting, like snorting. So we were very tense because we didn't know what was happening. Then someone says to him, and I think it's Marta, the technician who was there, she says, calm down, Jacobo, you look very upset. What's going on? Then he says that this person revealed a secret of Jacobo in Spain. In an interview. And then Jacobo wants to publish the part that tells the secret. He wants to publish it in writing. And it seems that the editor tells him not to do it because it could get him into legal trouble. And the information Jacobo wants to publish is that this person confesses to him that he killed a shaman in a state of trance. That he purposefully killed him and confessed it openly. But how did he kill him? This person kills the shaman. Right now I don't remember well how the detail of that is, but what he says is that he confessed to me that he had killed him, and he killed him just to practice and see what he felt and play with it. But he killed him, let's say, in some kind of witchcraft way to understand us. Or apparently he does use like a series of tricks, like cunning things, right? For like shamanic things, if you want to see it, negative to test. It was like playing with you don't know who this person is. Yes, of course. So he tells him this and that. He's very upset that he confesses it. And then the editor in Spain tells him, you can't say that because if you don't prove it. He told me, and I'm going to stand by it that he told me, Jacobo wasn't much into this lawyer and legal matters. And he believed that he knew that if he knew it, he had to say it. But he knew that his word was enough. I mean, he said, it's my word, right? But he assures this. Months later is when he disappears. How long? Very little. And who was that person? Well, that person later disappears. They also report his death. Who is it? Carlos Castaneda. Really? Carlos tells Jacobo that he wants his brain to study. Jacobo doesn't say it in a seminar to everyone. I just came back from a meeting I had with Carlos, and laughing, Jacobo told me he's crazy. He came up with saying that he wants my brain to study. And I told him that the one who studies the brain is me, that he doesn't have the technical or theoretical capacity to do it. And then it made me laugh, and he laughed. Time passes, and it seems that in that meeting they confess things to each other. I don't know what they reveal about Jacobo, because we never knew what they revealed in Spain. What is it that Carlos reveals in Spain about Jacobo that was private? I don't know. But what I do know is that he talks about Carlos Castaneda and says all this about it.
I think that Grinberg also had an overflowing ego. I believe that the risk of working with the spirit is always present, and we have the warning that the most dangerous thing that exists is the spirit. The risk of working with the spirit for a relatively normal psyche is a decompensation or loss of sense of reality. However, if one reads Castaneda and reads Grinberg, one realizes that indeed they are in front of a sorcerer, which is Castaneda, and that Grinberg, for better or worse, is a man who is openly seeking the things he seeks. The question would be, well, why does Castaneda find it necessary to suppress and make Grinberg disappear? To what extent was he involved in these alternative worlds that we could call sorcerous worlds? Unless it was a war of sorcerers whose language, whose terms are unknown to us, I see no reason to think that Castaneda was interested in his first Bible.
I understand that Carlos Castaneda's people use power herbs, right? And so, if there were secret things among all this, and if someone intervenes to show what was there, something feels like it's against their interests, right? And when there are sorcerers who handle power plants or all this, they distort many things, and it can become dangerous, just like passions can become.
Yeah. So that last part of this shaman who talks about people using plants of power, in the book of Castaneda, there's a witch who is after Don Juan's powers. And they eventually fight each other with their powers in the book. In real life, if a brujo like Castaneda felt that his power was being challenged in any way or compromised, they would have acted in a reactive manner, you know? And we don't know if this was the case, actually, because there are all those ties that I tell you about, where Grinberg was actually surveilled by the CIA and by the aviary and by the Invisible College and potentially by the Advanced Physics Group, because I just spoke to Peter Levenda and he... Okay, so I wanted to just ask my question because I think that this is going to be kind of a long and varied conversation, so I might as well ask it just now. I told you about Dr. Jacobo Grinberg. You told me you have read his material, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because I'm following a case with him that he disappeared and all that, but I just want to ask someone who has actually read his work. Do you think there's something to what he was working on? Do you think it was possible for him to make telepathy mainstream as he attempted? Because I keep asking a lot of people who are like on your level of knowing, and most of them don't even know who Grinberg was. And I wonder if maybe I'm just looking at something different.
No, I was fascinated with Grinberg for a number of reasons. One, his work on shamanism. I've written about shamanism in other books, and I started really researching it because of Mircea Eliada's book on shamanism, which I found was very, very impressive. I know there's a lot of problems with it. People have critiqued it. But shamanism to me seemed like a way into this very problem we're talking about, because a shaman, especially the Siberian shamans, they undergo this process of initiation, which seemed to me like deliberately entertaining a kind of complete nervous breakdown, right? And they would do it alone. They would do it in the forest. They would experience a kind of death. Their body would be cut open. Their organs would be removed and then cleaned. And then the organs reinserted. They would be sewn back up again. They'd had this horrible experience, right? An experience of death, dismemberment, and then pulling it all together. And then something happens to them. They come back to their community, and they're healers. They're shamans. So what fascinated me was the idea that what Grinberg was doing was saying, let me look at the shaman experience. Let me isolate it as much as I can. Try to understand what it means for our understanding of reality. Does reality exist outside, or is it just a construct of our minds, of consciousness? You know, we're building a kind of fake world based upon a bunch of disparate senses, but different information, data that's coming into us, and we're constructing this world. And then we deal with other people, and we agree on the basic construct of this world. And if that's true, then the brain is much more capable than we understand that it is. And it's really just a kind of interface between consciousness, which may be outside of ourselves, and an interior understanding of consciousness, sort of like the matrix concept, right? So I was fascinated by that. I was fascinated by his point of view of shamanism and his work with shamans. And the idea of taking the shamans in Mexico, I think he was working near Cuernavaca, right in the south of Mexico City, in one case. And, you know, the idea of getting into that mindset, because the shamans seem to be telepathic. They seem to have a connection to information sources that we, as a rule, do not have. And yes, so to answer your question, and I'm long-winded about it, I know, but the idea that telepathy is accessible to anyone, that people can be taught it, I believe is true. I believe that that's an absolute. Telepathy is only one of the many cities, for instance, that you're taught about if you're studying yoga in India, and you're trying to progress along a certain path, that you will begin to obtain certain powers. But you're not supposed to go after them. You're not supposed to deliberately drop everything and seek them. They just come along naturally, and you just kind of ignore that and keep going. That's the advice that they're giving you. But here, we deliberately tried these things. We deliberately tried to understand telepathy. We had, the famous Stargate operations. We had remote viewing. We had MK Ultra, let's face it, that tried to do all kinds of strange stuff, try to get into what they call the black box of consciousness, rummage around in there and see what could be done. Let's use hypnosis. Let's use drugs. Let's see if we can create new personalities. Let's see if we can erase an existing personality and replace it with a different one, as they were trying to do in Canada, with Ewan Cameron, the famous psychiatrist there. So all of these things were deliberately being attempted anyway. We know this. We know the Russians were doing it. We know the Chinese were doing it, still are doing it, right? So, and those are the countries that we know about. We can be fairly certain most countries in the world have some kind of project like that on the books. So to answer your question, yes, I think he was on the right track. I think his experimentations were fascinating. I don't know why he disappeared. That's mysterious. Was it deliberate or was it, involuntary? That's the other question you have to ask. But, I read his books in translation, but I can read Spanish. So I read the Creation of Experience and his whole text.
That's a brilliant book, that one.
Yes, it is. That's the one you have to, and it's, so far I don't think it's in English, but it's fascinating. I mean, the experimentation that he went through, the Faraday cage experiments and all the rest of it is fascinating. But that's what we were trying to do here with Andrija Puharich and the Nine. He was trying to develop systems that would do the same thing. He was testing psychics to see what was the physics behind their experience.
That's the thing, Peter, because in my investigation, Grinberg met with Puharich, Valle, Keel, in different conferences in the 80s. And I don't know if you're familiar with any of that or if you have any information on that, because I found that very interesting that they were like collaborating in a conference that was started in the late 1800s and it went on for decades. Like every few years they would get together and talk about all of these different phenomena. Did you know about this?
I don't have any background. I know what's been posted, but I don't have any, deep background on it. So I don't consider myself an expert on that. So
is well read up on Grinberg, and he told me that he believes that Grinberg was onto something. He actually believes that Grinberg had the key to making telepathy mainstream, and then he disappeared. So I don't think that Castaneda was the man directly responsible for Grinberg's disappearance. However, if you guys recall, if you like your history, during the late 60s, there was the MK Ultra experiment going on. And there are books that claim that Charles Manson, from the Tate LaBianca murders, was part of this MK Ultra program. And during that time, Carlos Castaneda lived in San Francisco, which is where SRI is located to this day, in Stanford. And at the time, nobody bothered Castaneda. He was regarded in high esteem, even by government people. So the teachings that he had, the knowledge that he had, given the history of SRI and Stargate, I wouldn't be surprised if people from Stargate or SRI approached Castaneda to ask him about this knowledge. And the fact that he was always safe and happy living in San Francisco or other places in California does tell me that if these agencies approached them, they were in good terms with them. So if Grinberg, hypothetically speaking, was to be either abducted or brought to the US against his will, I wouldn't be surprised if Carlos Castaneda was involved in that, you know? I'm not saying he was. I'm just saying that it kind of smells like he could have been. Especially with this clip that I just showed you, because it is extremely concerning. I'm going to keep digging, but I thought I would give you this little nugget of information so you can marinate on it. And just to tell you, even though Castaneda became a cult leader, and after the third book, you could pretty much tell that everything he was writing was bunk. That doesn't mean that the first three books, especially the first one, are still to this day some of the most impressive literature in Latin American history. And one of the seminal works of the counterculture and human potential guides, you know, because it's filled with incredible philosophy about life, about humans' relationship with nature, about the life of indigenous cultures, and this deep knowledge into psychedelic plants that still has a lot of stigma to this day. And a lot of that stigma was slapped on all of these substances right around the 60s, late 60s. So I think it is all connected, you know? And I think we should keep looking into this because it is a very interesting and important story. If you guys want to help, you can leave anything you want in the comments, anything you find about this topic. And if you like the content you see, you can like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification. If you want to support the channel in any other way, you can go to the description. I left a lot of links there where you can take your pick and support the channel. I want to thank Ida Cuellar for allowing me to cover this small clip from his video. I'm going to leave the full video in the description. And let me know what you think about this new discovery. What do you think Carlos Castaneda's role in Jacobo Grinberg's disappearance potentially was, if he was involved at all? Let me know. And I'll see you guys until tomorrow's video. Bye.